Hello, respected viewers. It's George from Ireland. Welcome back to my channel once more. So it's already 2023 in the Russian Federation because here I am in Londinium, Russia being a bit further east, and we know the sun rises in the Orient. Anyway, President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin delivered his customary New Year's television address. But he didn't deliver it from Moscow as he usually does. This time, supposedly from a military base near the Ukrainian frontier. Um, anyway, but this time he had himself surrounded by soldiers because he needs a bit of a macho image. He hasn't actually donned military uniform during this war because Zelensky put it on the first day and has never taken it off. Was military fatigues when he addressed the U.S. Congress. Some people said he was underdressed, but hey, he's sending a message. Putin, I think, would look even more pathetic if he put his military uniform on now. He's a person who's actually never been in the military for a single day. Neither have I. I'm a total civilian, but that's why I don't not a poser either, pretending that I am a military person. So he was surrounded by soldiers who, according to the commentary, had fought in Ukraine. He was awarding medals. He said that 2022 was laden with really pivotal and fateful events. Well, that's true, but perhaps not in the way he wants it to be. And he said that the frontier has laid our foundation for a common future for our real independence. Close quotation, as in future with Ukraine that he's trying to conquer. True independence, as though Russia's not independent already. What? Putin, pathetic. Well, first of all, it certainly is independent. It certainly breaks international law, if that's any measure of independence on an enormous scale. Which foreign country is able to control Russia? Oh, well, there is one, China, I suppose. So Putin, you've been in charge for 23 years and you still haven't achieved real independence. Pathetic. What an absolute failure you are in your own terms. As a chauvinist, as a hyper-nationalist, you should have achieved that decades ago. So it's just full of illogicality and contradiction, his very deceitful broadcast. But it gets worse. And there's another quotation from him. Today, we are fighting for this, protecting our people in our own historical territories in the constituent entities of the Russian Federation. Close quotation. So he's talking about the illegally occupied regions of Ukraine, Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Now, he only has about half of of 3 or 4 of those, and he's got the whole of the Crimean Peninsula. They've had that since 2014. Of the other 4, he doesn't have the capitals of any of those regions. So they're not his people, that they are Ukrainian citizens. All right, some of them don't want to be. Some of them are ethnically Russian. Others are Russophone. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're part of the Russian Federation. Some of them do wish to be part of the Russian Federation. So they're not protecting them. They weren't under threat until, of course, Russia invaded, started bombing willy-nilly, started deliberately destroying civilian targets, including hospitals and clinics on dozens of occasions, started raping, torturing, and murdering civilians on an enormous scale. The United Nations has confirmed the deaths of 7,000 Ukrainian civilians in this war. And their statistics about a month old confirmed that this person really existed, this person was a civilian, this person was killed during the war and as a direct result of the war, not an accident unrelated to the war. And the UN says that is probably a serious underestimate because, they're so far behind playing catch up. Their estimates up to 40,000 civilians killed in this war is probably too high. But anyway, for each civilian killed, they're usually three injured, varying degrees of severity of that wound, by the way. So these are the people he's protecting, that he's killing by the thousand. It is beyond preposterous, but they're yet more outrageous, howling lies that he tells. So lying is his modus operandi. I wonder if I actually finds it quite difficult to tell the truth. Can the devil speak true? But even a demon like Putin tells the truth occasionally. So he said that moral historical rightness is on our side. Well, so obviously the Russian military is exceedingly immoral. The Putin regime is exceedingly immoral. And not all Russian soldiers are bad as individuals. I've known some of them. I really liked some of them. And if you grow up surrounded by this 360-degree propaganda, it's very difficult to resist it. There's full spectrum propaganda. Think how much of the brain is subconscious, is just really formulated by repetition. because of neuroplasticity. If you incessantly hear this message that Russia is right, Ukraine is evil, they're all fascists, we're good, the big lie theory, if you lie often enough, then you'll fool people. Anyway, Happy New Year, DI Dig VJ. Then it's very difficult to resist that, which is why he's so keen to control propaganda and talk about the past. And it's true that, all right, Kiev was the historic birthplace of Russia, Kiev and Rus. Saint Volodymyr, or whether it be Vladimir, started the Russian Orthodox Church there. There wasn't a distinctive Ukrainian language or identity centuries ago, but there is now. It's been around for over 700 years. How many countries have become independent in the last 700 years? Almost all of them. Don't think any country existed in its current frontier 700 years ago. So we've moved on. It's trying to live in a time warp. If we really have to reverse 700 years, in which case Russia would lose most of its territory. They wouldn't have even the Volga Valley if that were the case. So he's trying to have it both ways. So he's really just a megalomaniac expansionist. All right. I mean, there is some historic case to what he's saying, but it's certainly not watertight, and it's no legal or moral argument for what he's doing. Nothing is justificatory of the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, and the crimes against peace he's committing on an enormous scale every single day. So he didn't do it in front of a Christmas tree as usual. He has imposing himself with young military personnel, including female soldiers. Anyway, so he also met General Sergei Surovikin, who's his commander of his so-called special military operation in Ukraine. Now, Surovikin is notorious for his crimes against humanity in Syria, the deliberate slaughter of several thousand civilians at least, the repeated use of poison gas against civilians. And surprisingly, he hasn't reprised this in Ukraine, presumably because the United States behind the scenes has warned them off. They'll be held to pay. Sanctions could get a lot worse. Long-range missiles, heavier weapons could be supplied, and Russia's been scared off resorting to their tried and tested modus operandi. Nevertheless, they'll surround some cities, pulverize them with more conventional weapons, but no weapons of mass destruction as yet. Anyway, Putin was chinking glasses with these military people and sipping champagne. And this is what Putin said. Russia was driven to the point of either surrendering everything or fighting. As long as we have people like you, of course, nothing can be given up. That's the end of the quotation. Well, even he's saying, as long as they've got people like you, they are going to run out of soldiers. Okay, I think not for a long time. Russia was not on the point of surrendering. Not an inch of Russian territory was taken by anybody else. Nobody was claiming an inch of Russian territory or anything like that. Russia was armed to the teeth. No one is even asking them to give up any of their weapons or any reparations or intruding on their sovereignty in any way. It's quite the reverse. It's Russia was saying that Ukraine wasn't going to be allowed to have an army, allowed to have its independence, allowed to have freedom. I mean, you could be free, you could be independent. They don't always go together, but they did in the case of Ukraine. Anyway. And so he spoke to soldiers who were volunteers from Georgia, from Cote d'Ivoire and Tajikistan, so keen to prove that not all Georgians support Ukrainian freedom. Remember that Tajik chap, he can be prosecuted back home for volunteering for the Russian military. There are a few African students there in Russia. Well, this guy's 41 from the Ivory Coast, so presumably not a student. And Russia's more developed countries, so perhaps it's a better life for them there. And he's joined. There was a Zambian chap who was let out of prison where he was serving several years for possession of drugs. He volunteered for the Russian military and he just got killed. His body was returned to Zambia some time ago for his funeral, which was a very tristful tale. Anyway, so the Georgian chap said that Russia will win next year. Wow, with it by spring, only 3 months to go. And said the Soviet Union is our common homeland. What? Present tense is. No, the Soviet Union, it doesn't exist. And it's not. They're actually all independent. They're all separate. And Russia's illegally occupying Abkhazia and South Ossetia. If the Soviet Union really was your common homeland, what would the need to occupy it? I mean, the Soviet Union already existed. There's no need to invade it. Anyway, this liar, Zviad went on to say, a commonwealth of friendly states, including Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, and others, will be together. We need to overcome these difficulties, then everything will be all right. That's the end of the quotation. Friendly states. Is that why one of them is slaughtering the civilians of the other by the thousand? Is that friendly? If they did that to Russia, would that be being friendly? Well, if this is you behaving friendlily, I'd hate to see what hostility is like with friends like these. My goodness. Anyway, so notably Putin himself did not forecast that the war was going to end in 2023. Now, that is very telling. The silence is deafening on that one. So even though he knows that can't be fulfilled, that would be a lie too big even for Putin, I suppose. But perhaps there's some dampened spirit in Moscow. No fireworks going ahead. They're usually spectacular. New Year is more of a big deal in Russia than Christmas. They normally go absolutely crazy for New Year because it's a secular state, and New Year's obviously 7th of this is now, but was Christmas Day 7th of January, going according to the old Julian calendar, still used by the Orthodox Church. And Moscow cancelled that after Ukraine liberated Kherson, and the money which had been allocated to New Year celebrations was given to frontline troops who are just lacking lots of basic supplies and uniform items and so on. But there are plenty of revelers on the streets. So Russia's war against civilians in Ukraine has continued today. Some barrages, but the Ukrainians are increasingly confident about their air defense, so they're shooting down more and more drones, over 70% of them. Now, they might be exaggerating, the Ukrainians, they probably are. But anyway, Putin said there was a real sanctions war against what was against by the West against him, but said that they haven't managed to destroy Russian industry, finance, or transport. Well, that bit is true, that the sanctions have not gone far enough, have not been as effective as people had anticipated. Nevertheless, they are hurting. Yeah, I obviously do feel sorry for some of the Russian conscripts that are called up, and not all of them are bad people, and some Ukrainians are bad people. It's just not like that. I certainly wouldn't demonize a whole nationality of 140 million people. I would this war ended, that Putin's criminal regime were brought to book, and the Russians were liberated too, and nobody would immediately be killed, and the sanctions could be lifted, and Russians would have human rights, democracy. All right, they might prefer dictatorship, but rule of law, things like that. And the world will be a better place, and the threat of nuclear war will be lifted. Thank you so much for watching my channel, and you have a very happy and peaceful 2023. Goodbye.